So Vicky's calling from the UK. Vicky's a theist. Pronouns are she, her. Please, can I have a structured discussion on what I believe God is that appears to be the closest thing to the truth? I want to get feedback for a sincere consideration of what my faith is at the moment. Hey, Vicky, how are you? You're on with Dr. Daryl Ray and me.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Please bear with me. I might sort of rant.
Sure.
Yeah. I was hoping to kind of get, I guess, an honest opinion about what I think, for want of a better term, is what God is.
Okay.
And
So
my
I want you to get
perception
into
is.
it.
Oh, sorry.
No. And by the way, there's a delay, and so it's going to just happen. I definitely want to, and I want you to get to that, and I want to be able to get Daryl in addition to me. So probably the best thing to do is to say, I think, or what? Here, tell us what you think God is, and why you think that is both an accurate. Why you think that's an accurate description of what is real. Does that make sense?
So, yeah.
Cool.
Like, so just on the basis of what reality is, first of all, is, and I firmly believe this, is what our repetitive thought is. So what we think constantly becomes a habit, and that is our reality. And it's kind of why we all have different perspectives on things, and why everyone has a different experience, because we have a different reality. So the people who are very religious, they'll constantly be thinking in a way that's different to someone who isn't religious. And so with my family, we had about 3-4 leaders of faith in one denomination of Christianity or another, and it's very encouraging to see people with faith, because there's something that they have a genuine appreciation for when it comes to their life, like in a way that sometimes you can take for granted. They're really looking to appreciate what it is that their God has given them. And for me, what I think God is a combination of science and evolution, where I think when the Big Bang happened, basically everything that we perceive is it's actually on the lateral plane. So we have time is something that we see as something happening one scenario or instance after another. I think it's already happened, and we just sort of experience as we do. But I also think that if evolution is a pattern that we're going to go by, you have people, showing how it is that one species developed into another. I'm thinking that that's how it would apply to the very beginning, like the very first instance of a molecule, or for want of a better term, a piece of existence, having evolved over and over and over again. I kind of see God as a scientist, like wanting to do the experiment over and over and over again, but with different results. So, like, as in each person, when we die, what happens is it's like a blink of an eye. It's something that God has experienced our life through us, kind of takes the information that they gathered from our existence and just repeats over and over, because it's the variety that builds the evolution. So it's like a constant spiraling of evolution from a point of something existing and to whatever you want to call the end, if it is an end at all, just something that wants to continue, because it likes to build up and up, like evolution does. I hope that makes sense.
I'll apologize, Vicky. No, it doesn't. I don't mean that in any way to be rude. I took a lot of notes.
No.
So I don't agree with one of the foundational things you said, which is that we all have a different reality. I would say we share a reality, and some people have different interpretations of reality, but your interpretation of reality isn't real. Like if there are people who are stalkers who think that somebody loves them when they don't. And so in their interpretation of reality, they think someone loves them, but in fact, that is simply not true. And so when you say we all have our own reality, are you suggesting that for some people, like there actually is a God and for others there's not? Or are you just saying that whether there's a God or not, there are people who believe and disbelieve?
The second, yeah, it's not that there will be an existence in one reality, and then.
Okay. Well, there's a bunch of stuff you said about. Yeah, I don't really know where to begin for some of this because you're saying when the Big Bang happened, you think it already happened and we experience it, and evolution is a pattern that we go by, and you're thinking this would apply to the beginning and explain the first existence of a molecule, and God, having evolved over and over again, is a scientist. And when we die, it's like a blink of an eye, and God experiences this through us and repeats it over and over again. And then there's something about the spiraling of evolution and something that wants to continue. I think the most charitable thing I can put together, Vicky, is that you're trying to use concepts like evolution, but in a way that doesn't match, as if it's an analogy for something, because evolution doesn't spiral and it doesn't have a goal. And while it is, evolution is merely change, biological evolution is merely change that is being filtered by the changing facts of reality. You know, as the climate in different areas changes, it determines which altered species are more likely to survive and thrive and pass on their genes. I'm still not clear on what you think God is and why you think it's real. I'm more clear on, and I'm still not clear on what you think happens after we die, which I don't know how you or anybody else could possibly know that. But I'm still wondering, what is God and why do you think he's real? Are you there? I'm not hearing you. And I see you're calling the web client. If you're on your cell phone, you may have to tap your phone to wake it up and then tap the browser that you're calling in from.
Hello?
To wake that. Yep, you're back. I hear you now, Vicky. Or I did.
Oh, hi, sorry.
Yeah. So I'm still not clear on what you think God is or why you think God is real.
So I just want to start off, but before I explain why, I will absolutely understand any sort of skepticism with this. And this is a very personal experience. So for myself, like obviously having experienced it, I can be 100% sure that it happened. And the only reason why I know that it did for certain happen, because another person experienced it, and I'll explain. So my sister and I, we have about 6 years difference between us. There was one night where we were both asleep in bed and in our own separate rooms. There was a sound of footsteps that was walking down the hall, and I didn't hear anything for about 5-6 seconds. And very suddenly, there was something that sat on my mattress, like it made a deep impression into my mattress, and it let out a huge breath of air through my ear, and it started choking me, whatever this thing was. I had bruises on my neck, and where my arms had been sort of locked into the sides of my ribs, I had like bruises from where my elbows were. So it was quite violent, whatever that was. The next morning, my sister, she's maybe like 8 at this point, was shaking uncontrollably. I was rushing out the door to get to school and still processing all this, and got back home, and she'd explained to me that there is an apparition that had appeared in her room, a small ghost child that had appeared in her room, close to her face. she'd heard the footsteps as well. So she saw this, but while I was choking at the same time, sort of comparing the duration of it, this child told her to shush, like brought the finger up to mouth and told her to shush. I was saying a Hail Mary, because at that point I wasn't actually religious. I was more verging on an atheist projectile. I had a lot of my parents pushing religion onto me and rebelling against it. So when I say this prayer, it's something that released what I was experiencing. It just stuck with me. So it wasn't something that I was like immediately, this is proof that there is God. However, there were other things that would happen later on that made me question what it was that I thought was just what people assumed was like paranormal activity is the only thing I can kind of really describe it as. I still think that there's a science behind it. I think that it's kind of part of how I see time. I think it's a planes thing. It's layered.
So Vicky,
things. Mm.
Yeah. So I promise I'm trying to deflect from this. I still don't necessarily know what you mean by God or why you believe in God. I know you're working to potentially get to that, and I'd like to get Daryl's thoughts on this as well. But what you're describing is something that may not have an actual explanation that we're able to garner, something that we have no way of investigating because we can't repeat circumstances or everything else, but is consistent with what my lay understanding of night terrors, sleep paralysis, and a number of other potential psychological, I don't even know what the right term is, conditions or whatever, can produce. And I wanted to get, now nobody's diagnosing you, that would be completely irresponsible, but I want to get Daryl's thoughts on this about, when you hear stories like this, Daryl, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm sure it was a terror. I'm muted?
You weren't. I'm wrong. Go ahead.
Okay. Vicky, I'm sure the experience was terrorizing to you. That comes across very clearly. What caused it, how it happened, nobody knows. And what we hear from people all over the world for thousands of years is they have experiences like what you've had. And there's no way to explain them because there's no way to verify it scientifically, to verify it. But but it is your personal experience. You'll have to figure out how best to interpret that. I don't think it answers Matt's fundamental question, though, about the God that you're talking about. I don't even know how what your experience is relates to any God. You were doing a Hail Mary, but I could probably point to many people who prayed to Allah, who have prayed to Buddha or whatever. They had the same result. So simply saying a prayer, which is something that a lot of people would do, but they're almost always, very few Buddhists pray a Hail Mary when they're in trouble, when they're having an experience like you had. It's almost always culturally specific, if you will. And that's what I hear. Your culturally specific response to this traumatic experience was to pray to the God that you're most familiar with. In this case, not the God. You're praying to Mary, one of the four gods of Catholicism.
What I'm wondering is, you had this experience, and I'm always, when people talk about experiences they had while sleeping, it's extra dubious. Like if you're wide awake, you've been awake all day, and you're standing there with a whole bunch of other people, and a spirit, tries to choke you, or that's the impression that you have, or your understanding of that image. That doesn't seem to happen, or at least with much less frequency. And so here you are in a sleep state where we know the brain is often altered, where there are things like sleep paralysis, night terrors, where there is often a disconnect between thinking systems within the brain. And so I'm wondering, for an experience like this, how do you go from this happened to me to therefore there's some kind of God? Because I still don't know what God we're talking about.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily how I've concluded that there is a God. It just meant that I was no longer certain that it was not possible to have that kind of spiritual deity, for want of a better term. So at that point in time, where most of my thought process was. Sorry, yeah.
How does having an experience for which you don't have an explanation demonstrate that spiritual things or gods are possible?
It didn't, but it left my mind open to it. So it was at that point that it allowed me to question things in a different way. Most of the time, when I came to a lot of my thoughts about religion, it was just flat out no, because I saw what my family either said that they believed and what I saw hypocritically what was going on versus what it was that I believe now. It's not like I all of a sudden was like, okay, I'm a believer because this thing happened to me. It's more like I was agnostic at that point.
Let's do this then, Vicky, because while this story is interesting and I would definitely recommend, exploring it to the extent you can and maybe talking to some doctors or therapists, but what we really need, especially because we're on a clock here and there's like 4 or 5 other people that are on hold. I just need to know, what do you mean by God and why are you convinced that is real? And as a side note for the fundraiser, we are closing in on $2,000. Let's see if we can get there soon.
So I think this is in part why I called, is because when I'm trying to put together the reasons why I believe that there is a God right now, they're so it's at such an infantile stage that I'm trying to figure out which direction I need to go to sort of logic this thing out. So right now, what I've got is my own personal experiences aside. The thing that I see as why I think that there is a God is because the way that we're still seeing and developing scientific theories, mostly in quantum physics, it's sort of developed into further things after string theory. There's like other things that go after that. All of these discoveries that we're making, it kind of makes me assume that.
You seem really nice. I like you. For almost anybody else, I would be incredibly irritated at this moment. And I saw a cool meme this morning, which is, evidently it's rude to reach out and touch someone on the forehead and say, skip intro. I get that you're trying to describe this, but what you just said when I said, what God are we talking about and why, is you skipped over the what God, anything at all that tells me anything about what we're talking about. And then what you said is, the thing that I see as why, because the way we're still seeing and developing scientific theories in quantum physics and string theory, you've now left the realm of talking about God or why to believe God, because we are still discovering things about the world for sure. There is no mathematical variable for a God or the supernatural, and there is nothing within quantum physics or string theory, which, by the way, neither of which may be robust, testable, and falsifiable sciences in every regard. But there's nothing in quantum physics or string theory that in any way supports any notion of God that I've ever been presented with. And so it seems like, and this is not remotely an insult, I'm actually applauding you. You're looking at the world and going, holy crap, something happened. I don't understand it. There's this and I don't understand it. Then I look around and I see these people and they don't understand it. And then my family is convinced there's a God. And these people here are convinced there's a God. I think they're wrong in what God needs and wants, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to address it. There's just so many things and I'm so overwhelmed. And look, when you look, we're still figuring out quantum mechanics and quantum physics and string theory and dark matter and all these things. There's so much out there. Maybe somewhere out there in the stuff we don't know is something that could qualify as a God. Is that a fair assessment of what you're trying to do? You may have to tap your phone again to stop the timeout.
Am I back yet?
I don't know.
You're back. You're back.
Yeah, you are. You are.
Cool. Sorry.
Would you say that was a fair assessment of kind of what you're trying to do? Maybe there's a God out there and the things we don't know yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the closest point that I'm at right now. Yeah.
Cool. That is perfectly normal. And it is a very tempting way to conduct a search for a God and to keep an open mind. But let me tell you, my mind is not closed to the possibility that there is some God out there. But I'm waiting for someone to demonstrate that it is in fact possible before I waste more time investigating a claim that might be impossible. To date, nobody's demonstrated that. Well, I'm getting there. To date, nobody has ever demonstrated that anything supernatural is even possible, and I have no idea how they would do that, but that's not my problem to solve. It's the problem for the people who are claiming they believe the supernatural is real and that their belief is warranted. Because if they're claiming to have a warranted belief for something that has never been demonstrated to be possible, they should be able to show that it is in fact possible and show why it should be considered a candidate explanation. And in the entire history of the world, to my knowledge, nobody has done that. And I've been debating this for 20 years in churches and on stages in front of thousands of people with some of the best minds in apologetics. And none of them have even taken the step of showing that the supernatural is possible. Instead, they keep doing what you're doing, only in a much broader sense of, well, I prayed and this happened. I prayed and this happened. Somebody else prayed and this happened. And we experienced this and this happened. And all of these things, it just can't all be, we're wrong or it's brain stuff or whatever. There just has to be something more. And that is fallacious because they've made no demonstration that there must be something more or that something more is even possible. All they've said is, I just can't believe that this could possibly happen in reality. There must be something more. And whether or not they can or can't believe it is their failing, not the fault of reality.
You're familiar with the term God of the gaps?
Sorry.
Vicky, are you familiar with the God of...
There's a last.
Okay, I was just saying, are you familiar with the God of the gaps argument?
No, what is that?
Well, from what I can hear, you're engaging in a God of the gaps approach to this. You keep inserting God whenever you don't understand something. And you acknowledge that there's lots of things that we now understand that we may not have understood 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago. The gaps, but as science and our understanding of the physical world gets better, those gaps get smaller and smaller. There's less room for God to be in there. And you keep pushing the God in that crack. Wherever you find a crack, well, it must be God, or hopefully it is God.
And you're in good company.
Matt chime in there.
You're in good company doing that because that's what people have done forever. When we didn't know how thunder or lightning worked, people proposed that it came from the gods. And then we figured out, oh, there's, electrons and this and different electrical potentials. When we didn't understand how life began, and we still don't necessarily know how life began, but when we weren't even in the ballpark of understanding what was possible or what explains the diversity of life, we credited gods for creating it. And then we discovered, oh, there's self-replicating molecules that are subject to change, and given enough time, they can change broadly. And then they're acted upon by natural selection, the natural pressures of, if you have offspring that lack the genetic traits that allow them to survive a particularly harsh winter, then they don't produce offspring. And the ones that can survive that harsh winter do produce offspring, and they're more likely to pass on those genes. We built those understandings, whereas while we didn't know people said, oh, it must be a God. And you're following that same route of temptation, which is, oh, I had an experience in a dream, or somebody had this experience here, or I have a former friend of mine. His dad used to say, I had a headache, so I said a prayer and I took an aspirin, and the headache went away. And the question is, okay, was it the prayer, the aspirin? Was it a combination? How do we tell? And the problem that we have is that whenever we investigate these things, we don't even get to consider the supernatural as a candidate explanation until somebody demonstrates that it should be considered a candidate explanation. And so the God of the gaps thing, which, by the way, you can Google and look up, it is a fallacy where the believers, advocates, insert God into gaps in our knowledge. The problem here is that when we fill that gap with understanding, in the entire history of our species, at no point has the right answer been confirmed to be magic or supernatural. Instead, the right answer is always natural and scientific. But when we have a gap in our knowledge and we fill it in, that means there's two new gaps, one on either side of that one, another. So what you're getting is smaller and smaller gaps, but you're getting many more of them. And this is why we're driven to recognize that every new thing we learn gives us the opportunity to find more things that we need to learn. And in the entire history of the world, the right answer has never been confirmed to be magic or supernatural. That doesn't mean it won't be. It doesn't mean it can't be. But the question remains, what hope is there that in the vast areas of things we don't know, there's a God? And if there is, why is that God hiding in the areas we don't know and don't understand? Instead of just saying, hi, I'm God, here I am.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you guys have said really makes sense to me. There was an experiment that was done in there were these scientists from Cambridge that oversaw this experiment that was done in the south of England, and I cannot recall for the life of me what it's called. But essentially, I'm gonna see if I can find it in my my search history and come back to you guys at some point. It was basically a group of scientists with a group of what do you call them, psychics, but mediums, the ones who can see through the veil,
the ones
apparently.
who
And
claim
they
that
all
they
sat
can talk
down.
with the dead and never demonstrate that they can.
Yeah, so these scientists from Cambridge were going over there to question this thing that they said that they could do. And there was two things that they did in this experiment and kept consistent throughout, which they used the same room and the same tools. And the tools were this machine that was used, that was constructed with very basic materials. There was glass, a particular type of quartz crystal, and something else that helps to conduct electricity through this particular piece of glass and crystal. And then that was on the center of the round table that everyone sat around. And behind everyone, away from the group, and far enough that someone would need to get up and walk for at least 20 seconds to get to this box, to get to this place. It was a box, and it was a locked box. It had no bottom, top hole, nothing that you could sort of maneuver to trick and get things into. And this group of scientists were watching the mediums conduct a seance, for want of a better term, where there was a woman who came through, and the place that they were at, she was a local person of the 1800s, I believe. I really have to double check to see what this was. But essentially, what this group consistently did was call people from the beyond, and there would be an image that would come through. They made contact, apparently, through this machine with people from even as far back as ancient Roman times. They had something to verify these things that would come through the box. There was a newspaper that was revealed to have appeared in this box, and it had the same ink type that was used in that time, same paper quality. They carbon dated it to see what it was.
I'm going to stop you here because you're basically, are you suggesting that scientists from Cambridge set up a box and brought in some psychics who caused things to manifest within the box that were then carbon dated to particular dates?
I think it was the psychics who invited the scientists because they were making these claims. So the scientists went to go test them out. Yeah.
We don't have any way to assess this right now without a link. I would highly recommend that you go look up Project Alpha and the film An Honest Liar, which is the story of James Randi's life. And those two together will lead you to a study of the James Randi Educational Foundation and parapsychological research and paranormal research, because I think I recall something similar to what you described, but without details and confirmation, I can't possibly get into it here today. But I guarantee you, if what you're describing is even close to accurate of what the scientists were reporting, there are a dozen skeptic organizations that have gone through this with a fine-tooth comb that can report on it. I'm just not able to do it here on the show. But let's assume for a second that we were able to bring in a psychic and they were able to cause something to manifest in a box on a table, and all of us were standing there, and all of us looked and saw the box was empty, and all of us stood 20 feet away, and they said something, and the box had something in it. What conclusion could we possibly draw from that?
So that's what I think might have been like the point of the carbon dating, was that was supposed to be the proof of this is the item that is legitimate. I thought that was what was supposed to happen. No.
We can't draw any conclusion from that. Even if they caused something to manifest that was carbon dated to, 5,000 years old. So what? That doesn't tell us what happened or why, and it doesn't confirm that something supernatural happened. It just confirmed that something we don't know happened. This is why, instead of scientists, or in addition to scientists, the JREF and others hired magicians, people like me, to actually people much better than me. I am a magician in addition to the other things, but people who know about trickery to specifically catch out deception. And what James Randi did with Project Alpha is he sent a couple of magicians to fool the scientists, to convince the scientists that they actually had paranormal abilities. And they were successful to the point that they were about to do a press conference to confirm that they had actually confirmed psychic powers. The scientists were calling a press conference to say, we've confirmed psychic powers. And that's when James Randi grabbed the two magicians that he had sent in to fool them and did a press conference before theirs to say they're about to claim that they've confirmed psychic power, but they have not. These are two magicians. We intentionally went out and tricked them. And what makes it really sad is that Randi was in contact with the scientists saying, you should try this, you should do this, you should make sure that this test protocol is used, you should make sure this test protocol is used. Under no circumstances should you allow them to touch these things or whatever else. So he was guiding them on how to bust the magicians. And he had also given instructions to the magicians that if anybody ever asked you, are you faking this? Are you engaged in just mundane trickery? They had to answer yes and had to stop right there. They were never asked. It never came up. It was never proposed as a possibility. And the scientists repeatedly failed to follow the guidance that Randi had given them. And this is one of the reasons scientists are really good at testing for things that they already know about. They have no expertise in trickery, which is why you wanted magicians involved. And so I highly recommend that, in addition, hey, look up the study you were talking about, send it to me in email, and definitely go take a look at Project Alpha and An Honest Liar, and look up stuff like that, because even the best case scenario wouldn't confirm the supernatural. It would just be, wow, something happened and we don't know why. Maybe it's supernatural, maybe it's not. How do we tell? We can't. And yet every time we figured out what the right answer is, still not magic, and trickery comes up more often than not.
Yeah. No, I will. Thank you so much for taking the time to at least like explain and sort of help me to understand where my thought process is going at least. It's
You bet.
really helpful because now I can actually direct it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vicky. I appreciate it. Thanks for calling.
Thanks, Vicky.
I wish you well, and go forth and learn the things, because this is stuff that's really cool. I'm not as up to date on this stuff, and I don't remember as much of this stuff as I used to, but I'm a skeptic and a geek and a magician, and I love trickery, and I used to be obsessed with pyramids and woo and all kinds of stuff when I was a kid, and are ghosts real, and witchcraft, and I had dowsing rods. I still have dowsing rods. I have them around here somewhere. Actually, they're in my magic bag, but is dowsing real? Is electronic voice phenomenon, all these things that are real, all this paranormal stuff that we don't know and couldn't explain. And that's what led me to the James Rand Educational Foundation. I have an entire library of books on pseudoscience, encyclopedias of pseudoscience, and a collection of books that are, here's all the weird stuff we can't explain, and I used to love watching those shows. I think if you start digging in and asking the right questions about how do I tell what's real from what's not, I think you're going to be fine. And what you may find is that if you're not willing to say, I'm convinced there's a God, until you both understand what God is, why you're convinced, and how you could defend that to somebody else, you'll be fine.
Wow, that was a great clip we just watched. Hey, Eve, what should the people do now?
Leave a comment, click like, subscribe, patreon.com/ does that say call the line?
Yeah. But if you could have made, we could just make it a little more natural. On the next clip, the outro will be much better.